Hello, my name is Danai the Tutor. Welcome and welcome back to my channel for those of you who are returning viewers. Today we are going to be focusing on Edexcel Paper 2 and we are going to go through the extended questions that are worth between 6 and 15 marks. That means that we're missing out the smaller questions, which are question 1, 2, 4 and 5. Those questions are questions that are worth between 1 and 2 marks and don't require you to write a paragraph, and we're not covering those today. We're going to cover question 3, 6, 7a and 7b. So, question 3 requires you to focus on language and structure. And it asks you to analyze how the writer uses language and structure to interest and engage the reader. This question is always the same. There's no variation. Obviously, the texts differ each year, but that question is always the same. It's always a focus on language and structure and a broad focus on how the writer interests and engages the reader. As you can see there, this question is worth 15 marks. Now, for this question, this is obviously paper 2, which is going to focus on non-fiction texts. This question is the same in terms of skill as your language and structure question on paper 1, which is also question 3. However, the difference is like I said, it's worth 15 marks, so it's worth more marks. And also, because it's a non-fiction paper, you can also look at other language devices that are applicable to non-fiction texts that are not applicable to fiction texts. For example, anecdote, alliteration, fact, opinion, rhetorical questions, repetition, emotive language, exaggeration, statistics, and triples. These persuasive techniques apply to all the questions on this paper except for the small questions and also question 7a, because you're not required to look at techniques for that one. So persuasive techniques, the different acronyms that people use to remember them, you may recognize them from acronyms like A forest, A forester, DA forest. They're very useful for helping you remember them. So for this paper, nonfiction, remember the persuasive techniques. There's a crossover with fiction techniques like alliteration. However, things like anecdotes, facts, statistics, these will be uniquely used in nonfiction texts. So when you are reading your extract for this question, look out for those techniques, okay? So the approach to this question is read the question carefully and highlight keywords. Read the extract and highlight quotes that answer that question. Make sure the quotes have language and structure techniques. I would suggest you pick 6 to 8 quotations, 6 to 8 short quotations that you can use, and then complete thorough notes for 4 of those quotations. So those 4 quotations that you do thorough notes for will probably be your main quotations, and then you use your other quotations to support your main point. You want to write 3 to 4 paragraphs for this question, okay? So that's my suggested approach to that. So the mark scheme, if you want to get the most marks for this question, you're looking at level 5, which is where 13 to 15 marks can be attained. So when we are seeking to achieve the top marks for this question, you want to make sure that you're analyzing. You want to make sure that you're analyzing both language and structure. You are capped if you only focus on either just language or just structure. So you have to make sure that you're analyzing both. And then your references need to be discriminating and clarifying your points. That's why it's important that your quotes are precise and that you are using other quotes to support and clarify the point that you are making. Okay, so this is an example of a question 3 paragraph. I realized that I didn't actually show you the texts that this response is based on. Here it is on the screen. This is the first text, which is which question 3 is based on. Questions 4 to 7 will be based on a different text, which I'll show you later on. It reads, the obituary opens with a comparison to other familiar famous musicians of his time, mentioning the impressive names of B.B. King, Ike Turner, and Elvis Presley. This helps to establish his status for any readers unfamiliar with him and to confirm it to those who are. The association with high-status musicians engages the reader. By using repetition in the phrase same place and same time, it emphasizes his place among the greats, elevating the importance of his life, which invites the reader to take more interest as they continue to read. Furthermore, Russell uses a metaphor to highlight the versatility of Milton's legacy as he escaped the confines of blues to become a spokesman for the entire African American community. This highlights his cultural significance through his music. The verb escaped points to this being intentional, which draws attention to this as an example of Milton's success in shaping his own public identity. This may inspire the reader and make them curious to find out how he achieved this. So here you can see that I have looked at the writer's use of different techniques, okay? We've got repetition. We also have a mention of the use of verbs, okay? So these are techniques that you would be familiar with in a fiction text, for example. Talked about use of metaphor there. But I also mentioned the use of names, which is a use of facts, okay? Which again is a technique that is exclusively found in a non-fiction text, as this one is. I'm just looking at what else to highlight in this paragraph. Okay, the key words in the question are engages, interest and engages, okay? And we can see in the third paragraph, the association with high status musicians engages the reader. So make sure that you are using the key words from the question in your response to make sure you are showing that focus on the question, okay? The fact that my first sentence is about how the obituary opens is a structure point. So I've looked at structure and language in this one paragraph, okay? So yes, this is an example of a top-level response to question 3 on paper 2. Okay, so like I said, we are skipping question 4 and 5 because they are short questions that don't require you to write an extended paragraph. Question 6 is an evaluation question, and it focuses on the other text. So question 1 was just focusing on text 1. Question 2 focuses on text 2, okay? And this is another unique aspect that differentiates paper 1 from paper 2, is that paper 2, you need to look at 2 texts, which makes it more challenging. However, when you understand how to approach and you practice, you get better at answering these questions. So the question reads, in this extract, the writer attempts to show his admiration for Bessie Smith. Evaluate how successfully this is achieved. Support your views with detailed reference to the text. 15 marks. So this question, same as question 3, is worth 15 marks. So because this is an evaluation question, you need to use spite and specs. I have elaborated on these in another video where I focused on the evaluation question on paper 1, but I will briefly go through them now. So spite helps you to know what to focus on, what to create your points around, okay? So spite focuses on settings, people, ideas, themes, and events, okay? So when you are evaluating, you are not simply looking out for language and structure techniques and analyzing them, you're evaluating how the text has successfully achieved whatever the question is asking you to focus on. Okay, in this instance, we are expected to focus on the writer's admiration for Bessie Smith. So you can create your points, okay, around whether maybe the writer has used the setting to highlight his admiration for her, whether the mention of specific people or the ideas, themes, etc. Okay? And then specs refers to the language that you will use to indicate evaluation. Okay? So specs helps you to remember the following: successfully, powerfully, effectively, creatively, skillfully. Okay? There are other ones that you can use, like convincingly, aptly, but these 5 give you a good foundation of adverbs, evaluative adverbs that you can remember and again indicate that you're evaluating. If you don't evaluate and you simply analyze techniques as if you're answering question 3, you cannot get more than 6 marks. Okay, so this first bullet point is pointing to things that help you to differentiate between the analysis skills that are needed for question 3 and the evaluation skills that are needed for question 6. Okay, so evaluating means you need to make a judgment about how well the writer has done whatever the question is asking you to focus on. Okay, always aim to say the writer has been successful. Okay, it's much easier to do that than it is to try and criticize, oh, the writer hasn't done this so well. Sometimes it works, but most of the time, to be on the safe side for this question, just evaluate that the writer has been successful and just look for evidence and explain why they are successful. Okay. Right, the rest of the points are basically the same as question 3. You read the question carefully, highlighting keywords, read the extracts, okay? The quotes that you pick, do look for language and structure techniques within them, okay? Because you can use your evaluation of language and structure techniques to support your point about setting or people or ideas, themes, and events. Okay, so it is still valuable to talk about language and structure, but it's only valuable if you are using it to support an evaluation. Okay, so the evaluation of, again, like I said, settings, ideas, themes, events comes first, and then you can use language and structure techniques to support that. Again, 6 to 8 quotations, complete thorough notes for 4, and then write 3 to 4 paragraphs. The mark scheme, again, as you can see, mentions ideas, events, themes, and settings, which is why you should create your points around those things. They want you to have a sustained, detached, critical overview about your judgment. So this is where, again, you can start to talk about language and structure techniques, because this helps you to explain in a critical, informed way why the writer is successful, why their use of setting is successful, why their use of this particular idea is successful. Also, make sure your references are apt, discriminating, and persuasive in clarifying your points being made. So again, having a range of quotes that you can use to really support and clarify the point you're making will help. This is text 2, which the next paragraph is based on. So this is an example of a question 6 paragraph. Okay, this is just one paragraph. Like I said, you want 3 to 4 for this question, but this is just one paragraph. Okay, Mesro successfully creates a sense of enthralled admiration for Bessie as the extract opens with a striking use of oral imagery as he describes the ringing vibration, how her voice boomed and was clanging full. This establishes the idea of the power in Bessie Smith's voice. I'm just going to pause there. So there you can see that those techniques that have been mentioned in an evaluative way, because I've said he has successfully created, they are leading up to the main point of the idea, okay? They establish the idea of the power in Bessie Smith's voice. So the focus on the idea is, again, as we noted, mentioned in the mark scheme, one of the things that you can focus on, okay? Which the writer develops convincingly, another evaluative adverb, using the adjectives walloping and throbbing, which suggests that her voice commanded attention with an added connotation of violence, suggesting her voice was ruthlessly superior and attracted admiration by force. So we can see that word admiration popping up again because it's the focus of the question. That's what the question is asking you to evaluate. Furthermore, Mesro concludes the paragraph with a powerful metaphor as he describes her voice as a flamethrower. Once again, this suggests that his admiration was involuntary, as the power of her ability was so good, people were hypnotized. And you can see there that that idea that was introduced of power, okay, I mention it again at the end, and then I also mentioned the admiration in that final sentence as well. And you can make a note there of the quotations. I've used short quotations throughout my response in order to make my point. And I've also used language and structure techniques to support my evaluation. I have evaluated throughout this paragraph, okay, using evaluative adverbs such as successfully and convincingly, okay? So I'm covering my evaluation basis there, okay? So this is an example of a question 6 paragraph, which is your evaluation question. And again, this is one example of one paragraph. You're expected to write 3 to 4 of these in the exam. Okay, question 7a. Okay, so question 7 is divided into 2 parts, 7a and 7b. Okay, we're going to look at 7a to begin with. So 7a is very different because you are not marked on your analysis of techniques or your evaluation of anything. This question is looking for you to look at similarities between the texts, okay? And it reads as follows: the 2 texts show singers who are memorable. What similarities do Milton and Bessie share in these extracts? Use evidence from both texts to support your answer. So read the question carefully and highlight key quotes. Read the extract and highlight quotes that answer the question. Select 6 quotations, 3 from each text. Write 3 paragraphs, and your paragraphs need to be structured in the following way: point, evidence, compare, point, evidence. There is no need to explain, okay? You do not need to explain anything for this question. It's worth 6 marks, okay? And I'm going to show you now a full response to this question. The mark scheme, okay, is as shown on the screen there. You want to show a detailed understanding of similarities, detailed synthesis of the 2 texts, which means bringing your observations together, okay? And then the selection of evidence is appropriate. So synthesis, you show this using comparative words, okay, like similarly or in the same way or like. If you're showing a difference, you could say on the other hand, however, but this question is focusing on similarities, okay? So this is an example. So for this question, okay, I provided 3 paragraphs. So this is like a full response to this question. And what you're going to see is it's quite straightforward. It's very easy to get full marks on this question, okay? Just make sure you have your similarity, okay, as your point, and then evidence from both texts. That's it. So paragraph 1, in both texts, Milton and Bessie have strong voices. That's the point, okay? And that's the similarity. They both have strong voices. In text 1, Milton has a heady brew of shameless imitation and lawless bravado. That's your quote for text 1. In text 2, Bessie's voice left people hypnotized by the walloping blues that came throbbing out of Bessie's throat. and that's your evidence for text 2. That's it, okay? And the rest of the paragraphs have the same structure. A point, okay, in both texts, and you state your similarity. You provide your evidence for text 1, and then you provide your evidence for text 2. There is no explanation of techniques, no explanation of ideas, no explanation of the meaning of the quote, nothing like that, okay? And this is all you need, and you can get full marks for this response by answering the question in this way, okay? So that's question 7A. 7B is more demanding than 7A. 7B is worth 14 marks, okay? And this question is asking you to look at how the writers of text 1 and text 2 present ideas and perspectives about singers, okay? So this question, as you can see, I've highlighted ideas and perspectives, okay? That's important to understand. They're not asking you to analyze the language and structure, although you can use it to support your main point about ideas and perspectives. They're not asking you to evaluate. They're asking you to look at, again, to focus on the writer and their point of view, okay? So the first bullet point that I've put there is use POVT, okay? That stands for purpose, okay? P is for purpose. What's the purpose of the text? Why have the writers written these texts, okay? For example, we've got an obituary, and that is for the purpose of chronicling someone's life, okay, remembering someone. So that's a different purpose to an autobiography where somebody is writing about their own experience and their own life, okay? One is to inform, and another is to entertain. So they have a different purpose, okay? It will be to entertain and to inform as well, perhaps, but the main purpose is going to be different depending on the text. It could so happen that you can get two texts that have a similar purpose, and that's fine. You can use that. You can make a point around that. Okay, so P is for purpose, okay? O is for opinion, okay? A writer can have a positive or negative opinion, okay? You can be more specific about that, but opinion, you can start thinking, is it positive, is it negative? If it's positive, in what way is it positive? As we can see, one of the points that could be made about text 2 is it's admiring, okay, the artist, so it's positive in that specific way. And then V is for viewpoint, and viewpoint is to do with whether or not it's a first-hand experience or whether it's an experience that maybe they're reporting on. So in these two texts, in text 1, the writer doesn't offer their own first-hand experience of meeting this artist, okay, or necessarily listening to their music. They're giving a third-person account of this artist's life, whether or not they have, been to a live concert or not. They are not including their own first-hand experience in this account. On the other hand, text 2, they detail their own experiences viewing this artist live. So it's a first-hand experience. And then T is for tone, and tone can be a formal tone, can be informal, can be humorous, can be serious, okay? So that's POVT. And then most of the other bullet points are the same as for previous questions, except for the quotation one. So because you're comparing this, you have basically 14 minutes to write these paragraphs, okay? So I think that if you select 8 quotations in total, 4 for each, then I think realistically you would be able to answer this question in the time that you have, okay? And you want to write 3 to 4 paragraphs, okay? You should look at language and structure techniques in order to support what you're saying about the writer's ideas and perspectives, okay? So as we can see there, that the mark scheme wants you to have a varied and comprehensive range of comparisons, okay? So again, if you're aiming to write 3 to 4 paragraphs, then that will cover that part of the question. And you want to focus on similarities and differences, okay? So comparison is looking at both similarities and differences. And then analysis of writers' ideas and perspectives, including how theme, language, and or structure are used across text. So again, when you pick your quotations, make sure you're picking quotations that are rich in things that you can talk about in order to support whatever you say about the writer's purpose, opinion, viewpoint, or tone. And then finally, references need to be balanced across text and are discriminating and clarifying the points being made. So make sure that you are having an equal amount of quotations for each text. Okay, you don't want to have 2 quotations for text 1, 8 quotations for text 2. Okay, that's not balanced. So you want to make sure that you're equal in your presentation of evidence. Okay, so this is an example of a 7b paragraph. I'm sorry, that's a typo there. It should say 7b. Okay, so it reads as follows. Text 1 has a more formal and informative tone, whilst text 2 has a much more personal and affectionate tone. So the first sentence should be making your comparison point. It's really important that you are talking about these texts in the same paragraph at the same time. You don't want to make the mistake of writing one whole page about text 1 and then another page about text 2. You're comparing, okay? So the first sentence should be a comparison sentence where you're talking about similarity or difference. This question is talking about difference. I've used the connective whiles to transition into talking about the difference there. And then I'm going to go into explaining why my point about text 1, okay? In text 1, the writer chronicles the life of Milton in third person, using many facts to provide the information readers may expect in an obituary, stating during a 5-year period he produced numerous records that were both artistically satisfying and quite successful in the R&B charts. His achievements are detailed along with the specific dates and time frames. This creates a sense of comprehensive coverage of important events in his life. The use of adjectives such as successful highlight Milton's achievements in a similar way to the way Bessie's are highlighted. However, comparison, the presence of facts from the beginning to the end of Milton's life convey them with a sense of formality and professional distance. So there, I've noted that there's a similar way to Bessie's, however, and I've pointed to a difference. So I'm comparing, okay? So there, I've just focused more on Milton, ended that point with a comparison. Now we're going to move on to explaining why text 2 is more affectionate and personal in tone. On the other hand, the writer in text 2 is far less restrained in his portrayal of Bessie Smith. He writes that she was a very great artist, born with silver strings for vocal cords and a foaming, churning soul to keep them a quiver. The hyperbolic language and striking imagery convey the writer's personal admiration for Bessie Smith. The phrase silver strings conveys a sense that her voice was an instrument able to perform above and beyond the ability of other singers. The reference to a churning soul highlights the writer's insight into Bessie's pain and appreciation of her ability to convey this in her music. Although both texts share a focus on their achievement, text 2 has a markedly more affectionate tone due to the plethora of positive adjectives and grand imagery used to describe Bessie Smith, whereas text 1's detailed facts balance the celebratory aspects of the obituary, maintains a formal tone. So you can see there, we begin with a comparison. In the middle of the paragraph, I compare again, and then at the end, I make sure I compare because I'm maintaining the demand of the question to compare. I've also focused there on tone, okay? That's the aspect of their perspective that I'm focusing on, the tone, okay, that they're using. And then I've also focused on different techniques that help to support my main point about the difference in tone that I had made in my first paragraph. Okay, so that's it for this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.